Welcome back to this week's episode, everybody. I wanted to jump on real quick and give you a short introduction to my interview with the CEO of St. Baldricks, Kathleen Ruddy. This organization is dedicating to finding the most promising research in ending childhood cancer as we know it today. Kathleen Ruddy has been doing this for quite a few years, and I want you to stay around and listen to the entire interview. It went so well and so long that I'm going to break it into two parts. So please make sure that you stop by next week to hear part two of my interview with Kathleen Ruddy, the CEO of St. Baldricks, and make sure that you look them up on all social media as well as the internet, the St. Baldricks Foundation. Welcome back to the Childhood Cancer Perspective, and thank you all for sticking with me for so long as I continue to detail the journey of a parent's perspective as well as siblings' perspective for our daughter, JC, that was diagnosed with a rare form of brain cancer in 2020. After 520 days, she laid down her sword and she left us one hell of a mission to continue. And one of the silver linings that you can get out of this type of diagnosis or this community is the people that you're able to meet and collaborate with that are all working for the same goal, which is to make a massive difference in these children's lives. So the next organization and the guests that I have, we didn't work specifically with them, but definitely followed one of their trends when JC started to lose her hair, and several of us shaved our heads in solidarity and support of her. There's a video somewhere of her shaving my head on Instagram, I believe, and being happy about it. So my next guest is Kathleen Ruddy, the CEO of the St. Baldricks Foundation. Welcome to the show. The floor is yours.
Curtis, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share what we do with your audience, and hope that what I have to share can help all of us achieve our shared mission to conquer kids' cancer.
Absolutely. It is the one goal I think we all have in common is that these kids deserve so much more than what they're getting. We can get into statistics later and things like that, and the old 4% that everybody knows about and we hear about, but not too many people, I think, understand how the numbers are, and we break them down in certain ways. I think it will give you a different perspective. So how did you get started with just advocating or with St. Baldricks in general?
Well, I had always worked in the nonprofit sector for many wonderful causes that are so important for society. But along the way, so many of us throughout life, we know and love many people who fought cancer. And I should tell you that growing up, I always wanted to be a pediatrician or an obstetrician until I discovered that I really stank at science and I wouldn't be successful at that. And so I always had this orientation and draw towards children's issues and health. And one day I got a call from a search consultant looking to fill a role. And it was not for St. Baldricks. It was for another organization where St. Baldricks had occurred once. And I was brought there to do one thing, and I was on the job about an hour. And my then boss said, well, you're Irish. You should work on this thing over here. And you used to do events. And I guess I should tell your audience that what the program that you referred to in your introduction is our signature program, which is our head shaving program where people voluntarily grow their hair and then shave it bald in solidarity with kids with cancer. Our three founders were Irish, and so they had their first event on St. Patrick's Day in the year 2000. And so St. Patrick's Day became St. Baldrick's Day, and that's where our name came from and so forth. And I guess my boss, having a good sense of humor at the time, was like, well, you're Irish, you should work on this. And little did I know at that time it would be the greatest blessing of my life to be able to do that and be able to work on this and grow it. And a few years later, we spun it into its own foundation. So, I came to it kind of accidentally or right time. I was lucky. I was in the right place at the right time. And so I had this marvelous opportunity to be able to work on this. And so St. Baldricks in 2004 became an independent standalone charity. And while our bread and butter program still is the head shaving program, now we're we like to say a grown-up organization that offers volunteers and donors lots of ways to support this work. And today we're the largest largest charitable funder of pediatric cancer research grants. And we support every stage of research from, ideas in the lab all the way up to clinical trials, including big consortia grants, infrastructure that enables institutions to treat more kids and to open up more trials. And we fund grants that train young physicians to also be scientists. And pediatric oncology is a challenging field to draw people to because there's so little support for the research that you have to be really committed to kind of make that commitment. So we try and make it easier and easier for doctors to say yes to a career in this field so that we can continue the work that so many have already started.
Yeah, I think it's something that I don't think people really realize is the dedication that goes into working with kids in general and then working with children that are sick or are fighting. And it takes a very, very strong and determined person to want to keep pushing in a field where, yeah, there's not a lot of support. The funding's not there. A lot of the things that we hear when we're trying to figure things out here in Wisconsin with what we're trying to do is that, we just don't have the staff. We don't have the funding. We don't have the people to be able to
Mm-hmm.
run labs or to run research and things like that. And it's tough. And how do you attract more people into a field where they're not going to have the support that they
Right.
really need and truly deserve to be able to make a difference in what is maybe cliche, but our future. Without these
Yes.
children, there will not be any more doctors and scientists and politicians and whatever moving forward because they're not getting the opportunities and chances to grow up. So being able to find a way to get that research funded, I think, is something that is so hard and so misunderstood in a community that already is misunderstood
Mm-hmm.
and underfunded to a disgusting amount. And it falls on organizations and nonprofits to really carry that funding. And if we're not a massive platform as far as our organization here, but whatever we do or whatever St. Baldricks does or other organizations, we're carrying the load when it comes to funding research and funding doctors and giving them the support they need. And that's kind of the backwards to the way that it should be, I think.
It's so true. And, I think so much about childhood cancer is misunderstood from the starting with what we call it. We call it childhood cancer as if it's one disease. And just like in adult cancers, there are so many diseases. I've talked to many scientists who say there's by the time you consider all the major types of pediatric cancers and then all the subtypes, there's really like 100 different diseases, maybe more. And then each disease behaves differently in every single child. And that's why it's not easy to treat. It's not easy. There's never going to be one cure that fixes everything. And why investment in research is so critical, but also why there's drastically fewer dollars in pediatric research than in adults. Now, you can argue because fewer kids get cancer than adults, because pediatric cancers tend to be based on genetics or something going on inside the body. Many adult cancers are environmental or lifestyle cause. And so it's great that fewer kids get cancer, but then you can't make progress as quickly. And you have to work with each child as this is going to sound terrible, but maybe as strategically as possible so that you can learn as much as possible from each child's journey so that it can help the next child and so on and so on. And, in adult research, many diseases that adults get are so common that, you can have research done at relatively small hospitals and they can get treated for it at community hospitals that are not major powerhouse research institutions attached to an academic center and so forth. So, but in pediatrics, you've only got 200 places in the whole country that even have a team qualified to treat children with cancer. And they really need an academic institution partner And they're all going after a very small, relatively speaking, pool of dollars at the National Cancer Institute, which is the largest funder of pediatric cancer research grants, but it's taxpayer funded. And we all know how many things are competing for the taxpayer dollars.
Mhm.
And while we've done a great job in recent years of getting the federal government to commit more dollars to pediatric research, it still can't make up for what doesn't exist from the pharmaceutical industry, in philanthropy, etc. Because most of the big cancer organizations are focused on adult cancers, and the bulk of their dollars go there. And part of that is because adults are the volunteers, adults are writing the checks, adults are out there raising the money. And there are more adults with the diseases. So I give you credit for raising awareness of the needs of kids. And I know JC inspires all that you do, but you're making sure that JC's legacy is to help all the kids who follow her. And it's so important to help people understand how best to help children with cancer and what are the viable ways to get that aid to them.
Right. No, absolutely. And JC is the driving force in everything that we do. But it's that innocence in a child that I think that our neurosurgeon said to us the first time that we met him is the reason that he decided to be a pediatric neurosurgeon is to protect the innocence and save the innocence of these children that because they can't speak for themselves. They can't, they can't. Some of these young children, and we'll talk about that when they come out as these young 6, 7, 8, whatever, and they're advocating. I love that. I love to see them out there doing that. And I think their words have such an incredible impact, more so than us. And
Mm-hmm.
because they should be just being a kid, but yet they're out there fighting for their friends and for their, they're the ones that they've lost, and they're doing that. But yeah, the protecting these children is such a vital piece of what we need to get people to understand. And you said something too about that I've always, we've a lot of adult cancers can be linked, not all of them, but they can be linked to environmental factors or lifestyle factors, things that these kids don't have a chance to make those type of mistakes, those
Mm-hmm.
types of choices in their life that are causing. Our daughter lost her closest friend last year in August to a liver cancer most closely associated with people that drink. She was 11. It was obviously not what was affecting her. And
Mm-hmm.
because of that, I feel like, okay, we can understand what is causing the cancers in adults better because we can link it to these types of things. But with children it's genetic and it's just crappy luck most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think we need to devote more time and effort is to understanding that. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of, research that we get for adult cancers for treatments comes from kids, but yet
That's right.
we're not turning that back and giving the kids what they deserve. And, we were in DC last year. We go there every year. And they talked about how they doubled it to 8%. And to me, my wife is always the person that says, well, I don't care because it was too late for JC that you're pushing all this now. And I look at it and I'm not positive about it either because I still think that's horrible. We can't even get them into the double digits and you're excited about it. We shouldn't need legislation that says that we need to protect our kids because they're not, like I said, they're not going to grow up and take care of you and vote you back into office because they're not going to be here. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, it's this isn't always about politicking, but it's the same thing. If you want to be, have a future in what you're doing, then you need to make sure these kids are okay. And I've always said too, that every politician from day one, left or right, it doesn't matter, always uses kids in their platform, whether it's food, whether it's healthcare, whatever, they always use them. And then now we're here fighting, and I've got all these members of Congress, and I've got one person responding to me. That doesn't add up.
Well, it's interesting what you say because we see that in the pharmaceutical industry. We see it across philanthropy, whether an organization is focused on adult cancers and maybe a little bit of kids still figure prominently in all the marketing materials and so forth. And I think part of that is it's good advertising strategy, I guess, because you're appealing to everybody's empathy and the desire that we as humans have to protect the next generation and the purity of and the innocence of childhood. No child should have to fight for their life as a child. And so, you know, it, it appeals to all of us, but it does not feel right. And I agree that, pardon me, that you want it to be fair and you want it to be representative of what's really happening. And because children figure prominently in whether it's a campaign speech or an ad or a promotion for a charity or a pharmaceutical company or whatever it is, you kind of assume that that means kids are benefiting widely. And we are proud that we've doubled the investment at the federal level in pediatric cancer research. But I would say to you, Curtis, that's not by no means the end of what we're trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just simply a measure of progress. And we are a smaller community going to Washington, D.C. than many that go there. So I would say our results and the growth we've achieved is probably greater than many other groups of people who are going to Washington to ask for more support for whatever their cause is. We've had an outsized response in terms of the federal government and Washington, but it's nowhere near what the kids deserve, and we're not done. And it's a step along the way, and we have a long way to go. And so I appreciate you emphasizing that because it's really accurate. We do have a long way to go. And I think that when I go, I hear a lot of people who genuinely want to know what to do, but they really need to hear from families and they need to hear from researchers as to what will work and what will be effective, what's needed and what will work. Because in my experience, most legislators will say, I'm not qualified to say what is the fix. I'm not a physician. I'm not a scientist. I'm not even a parent of a child with cancer. So tell me what's going to work and why do you believe it will? Because even though the government's checkbook is big, so to speak, they still have lots of people they're accountable to. So I know it sounds maybe like I'm defending them, but I feel like it's important, and we potentially demoralize our community if we don't acknowledge we have made progress and that we are getting somewhere. And I want people to feel like there's hope, because I do see that the government is saying, tell us what's next. Tell us what to do next. Help us figure this out. And they really do listen to the National Cancer Institute and the researchers and so forth. So I think there's a receptiveness, but it certainly gets lost in all the politics of Washington. And it's not something that we hear about spoken about in press conferences and things like that, as we would like. And so your point is well taken that there's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I know that for me and for our family, I think the longest time is, we've always wondered what is actually happening. Is there any research actually going on? Because you don't see it firsthand. You're not in the labs. You're not, at the congressional hearings and stuff. You're not there to see if anything's actually happening. This past January, I had the opportunity to go to Madison and tour a doctor's lab that's actually doing work on neuroblastoma. And I was able to see all of the different aspects of what they're doing and speak to the scientists there and their progress of what they've got going on. And it was incredible. And it was a great experience because I got to actually see that things are actually happening versus just being told, we're on the cusp of something. We're doing something here. It's working. I was actually to see there. I was to be able to see the students that were doing the work. And it was fantastic. And then, this past week, I was able to speak to a doctor in New York that is actually doing research and just received a $500,000 grant from the government to continue research on the type of cancer that JC had, which is a type of cancer that every time I say it, choroid plexus carcinoma, most people have never heard of it. And even doctors, they've never heard of it. And to find him saying, I'm finding things that are changing and that are happening, and I've got years of research ahead of me. but that's positive because I actually see somebody that wants to do it and wants to go after the road less traveled by and pick a cancer or disease that is not being looked at. So that moves forward with, ideas that we have here, trying to get past and trying to create a rare tumor and rare brain tumor data bank here in Wisconsin that can be used by the UW system and create amazing opportunities for doctors, researchers, and students. So it's something that we continue to push. And I've always said that, we're not going to stop doing what we're doing until I feel like the progress is good enough. And if we accomplish this and come move forward, my wife has said, will you stop then because you've got that, that accomplishment? The answer is 100% probably no. I'm going to continue to go until I feel like there's not anything left to do. And we are a business as a nonprofit. I've always said is the antithesis, which is we want to go out of business because we're no longer needed anymore.
That's
So,
exactly right.
So hopefully that will come one day when I feel like our daughter's name has been given the proper respect that she deserved and demanded. Then I feel like that I'll have made a change. But many people, I think, in my space, in our space, we feel as parents or as advocates as failures until that actually comes true. Whether or not that's the case, that's just an internal feeling you can't get rid of because we're still seeing kids dying every year. We're seeing them diagnosed every year. And then we're also told, well, it's rare, it's rare, it's rare. So why are we focusing so much effort on it? Well, because we're living it every day and we didn't get to shut it off.
It's interesting. I've heard what you just said in the last minute or so is a story I've heard so many times. The concept of a parent saying, I feel like I let my child down or I failed my child because I couldn't get this, but really medicine failed. And it's not because people aren't trying. It's because we haven't figured it out yet. And I should say I'm not a parent, so I don't want to speak for you. I offer that to you because every parent's dearest wish is that their child grows up, survives, thrives, lives their dreams, etc. And you, I'm quite sure, did everything you possibly could to provide that to JC. Now, we don't know everything we need to yet. Life and medicine is a process of discovery. You mentioned that, you want to know what progress is happening. And, I can share that being close to the research world, we get updates here at St. Baldricks all the time from the researchers who we fund. Now, we can't fund every single project going on everywhere, but, things that may look like an overnight sensation started 20 or 30 years ago. And, with some kind of idea, and it takes time to figure out what is and isn't working and for whom, and under what conditions does it work, and validating each step so that you're building a therapy that is as safe as possible for a child as well. And we have the great privilege of being able to publish research outcomes of all of our grants and sharing the news of progress that's being made. And I know that other funders of pediatric cancer research do the same. And you just mentioned that University of Wisconsin does the same thing. I think it's important that we all do that so that we can show our donors and volunteers that what they're doing is making a difference and is moving the needle and driving innovation and progress. A doctor I knew who's passed away now used to call research insidious incrementalism because you have to break it down into the most minute steps to verify every single thing along the way to understand what is working, is it effective, is it safe, and under what conditions and so forth. And then is it better than the thing we had before? And all of that. And that kind of mirrors the clinical trial process as well. So it's frustratingly slow. And until we figure out, mankind, I think, figures out a better way to make medical research advances, it's going to remain frustratingly slow. And unfortunately, there will be more children lost in that process. And that's why we are trying hard to get more people to support the front end, to create more opportunity so we can have more people work in the field and drive innovation faster. But I hear you, and I feel, I sense the pain underneath what you're saying. And I think each of us at different times and frequently, I would say, feel a sense of failure because what we're doing is not fast enough. And we're all trying to figure out how to make it faster. And I think for me as a layperson, not being a scientist and not being blessed with those abilities, where I get to make a change is by inviting more people to be part of it and to contribute at the front end by raising awareness that can lead to new volunteers and to new donors and monies that researchers need to fund that next project and that idea that's been sitting on the shelf waiting because there isn't enough money to do it. And that's the tragedy too, that all of us have a role to play, whether or not we're a scientist. If we can give up 1 cup of coffee a week, or if we can, give up a dinner out occasionally or something like that, we can direct those funds to research. And I think one of the things that we offer at St. Baldricks, our value proposition, if you will, is that we fund the very best research wherever it's taking place. So your daughter was being treated in Wisconsin, and kids with cancer in California and Florida and everywhere in between want to know that the hospital near them that they're going to has the right team in place that's qualified and able to treat them and able to offer the state-of-the-art treatments. And for us, I should back up and say for any parent, for any donor, most people are not scientists and are not able to judge what institution is doing the best work or has the most innovative ideas for my child's disease or a child in my community. Do you really care if the cure comes from Boston or from Texas or from Colorado? You don't. You just want there to be one. And you want the hospital where your child is to have access to it, to know what it is, and to be able to safely administer it. And so our work is really aimed at that. But we offer the donor and the volunteer is the assurance that through our rigorous scientific review, we're going to get the dollars to the hands of the researchers who have the greatest potential to make a difference and to drive progress and innovation.
And that is such a key thing because I think so many people, and this is not directed anywhere, but they blindly direct donation dollars to organizations based on what is ingrained in you. And I think that all of us can have several organizations in our head that we've heard, since birth. You've heard them on TV and whatever, and you just donate, but you don't research into where your money's actually going. And so you don't pay attention to the impact that it's making, just that it's going there. But is it funding, research, or is it funding a new car? Is it funding, the summer home of the person running you don't know. And so I urge everybody, not to take away where you're donating your money, but just research where it's going and understand that all that stuff is public and you should be able to understand and know where it's going. But also key to understand that having a hospital was where you're at, having the tools and the people there to operate those tools and be able to administer them to your child is something that is lacking hugely. I think so many people are, we live in Wisconsin, and we were treated in Milwaukee, treated in Green Bay. But yet when it came time for them to say, there's nothing more we can do, we were searching all over through New York, through Boston, California, wherever, trying to find other hospitals that may have a different tool or a different option. But we shouldn't have to do that. Those tools should be available everywhere doctors talking together and sharing information should be key.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I think you do see a little bit of territorialism when it comes to doctors sharing information, not on the side of, I'm not going to give you the information to save your child because I can't put a notch in my belt. But at the same time, if they've got something incredible happening at their hospital, they want to see you there and treated there so they can do it directly. And I think we need to understand that that is a real thing. And just sharing information across the board should be an easy thing to do, an easy thing to understand. But, having that option available where you are, I wish it was normalized in all 50 states, every children's hospital. Yes, one can be the best, one can be the best at this and the best at that, but they should all have the tools available to them to be able to treat your child where you are. So you're not worried about traveling and you're not worried about all of that. You're right there, you're close to home, which being at home and close to home can often be better than any medicine. That feeling of being where you need to be and safe is it does a lot to you mentally to have to travel all over the place just to find the correct treatment that should be available to your children right in your backyard.
It's so true. I think, you know, doing this work for so long, families tell me all the time that being able to stay at home close to your center of support, your support system, your neighborhood, your church, your school, you have a built-in community around you and you're going to need them. And how many times I've heard, that once your child's diagnosed, one parent automatically has to quit their job and to become the full-time caregiver. And then the other one's trying to hold down the job and keep the bills paid and be available at the hospital as much as possible. Look after the other kids. Everybody in the family goes through the cancer diagnosis and it affects every member of the family different. The other kids are impacted significantly. The extended family, the neighbor, everybody is a part of it. It really does take a village to get a family through a treatment, but it affects everybody in different ways, and everybody feels, I think, a little bit helpless because they can't just go in and eradicate the cancer. This is something that's beyond most of our control. And so I do think being able to be close to home not only is financially less burdensome for the family, it keeps the family together and closer and more intact, but it allows their community to help. And I do see that there are ways that institutions are endeavoring to collaborate more and more. One of the ways is by having tumor boards at some of the larger research institutions that have more philanthropic support, and often they're in places that are more densely populated and so forth, but they will serve as almost a consulting function. So, for example, many years ago, I was able to visit Children's Hospital of LA, and they have in pediatric brain tumors a whole kind of, I would call it, they probably wouldn't use this word, but almost like a consulting practice where cases from all over the world at times will be sent to them because they have so many different specialties in pediatric neuro-oncology and so many different roles that they can support a team like that. They have the funds to do that through their philanthropy and so forth, and the numbers of patients and so forth. So they can, doctors in other places can send cases to them, and then they can go over and analyze it, and then provide guidance and feedback back and determine, can they help there at Children's Hospital of LA? Or is there another place that would be better suited to that child? Or what advice would they give that team that's treating the patient in their local community? And so I do see things like that happening, and CHLA is only one example of that. And I know that when that can be done, you're working smarter because you're stretching the dollars further. You're not expecting every institution to maintain replicable staffing when they may not all be needed in that area. And so there are efficiencies that are trying to be gained. But again, it's knowing and having doctors at each hospital who will reach out to their colleagues for help. And it does seem Now, from my perspective, I do hear about that happening a lot. But if it isn't happening everywhere, then that's an opportunity for us to work on that and encourage more of that kind of collaboration, because it only helps the patient. And I think we'd all like to see more of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's highly important. I know that when JC was diagnosed, the oncologist that we were assigned, I guess, because that's who was there and on the floor at that time, had never heard of her type of tumor, that type of cancer. He did reach out to sick kids in Canada, and I believe he reached out to CHOP, and I believe Seattle. So I mean, he did reach out to these other organizations to try to get a plan together for how to treat it and how to move forward. So I know that, the collaboration does happen. I think that throughout the experience of going through, as a parent, going through it and seeing it and hearing it, and then meeting all these other families and being part of this community and whatever, you do hear a lot and you take in a lot, and you're always wondering, why did that happen the way that it did? Why not reach out to this person or this person? Or why is there not some global network of just, getting on the computer and being able to kind of get in touch with the right person? It's definitely a hole that I think needs to be filled. I think that it works positively, but there's a lot of room left. Just like, the entire community, and moving forward, there's a lot of room for improvement. And I think we'll get there if we continue to bring these problems to light. I know that it'll never happen, but I wish tumor boards kind of happened on a case by case basis, and allowed the parents of that case to be there to actually hear what's going on and understand, because we often get the Cliff Notes version of what's going to happen, because we're treated as parents like we're not going to understand the big medical words. That was said to me by our oncologist at one point too. We don't tell you this, that, or the other because we're not sure if you're going to understand. I know what Google is. I know what the internet is. I can figure it out. And we understand, and our kids understand way more than they're given credit for. At 6, 7, 8 years old, and they can list off every chemo drug that they're on and every pill that they're on. It's not what I want them to remember and know,
Right.
but they do.
Right.
So
It's so true. There's so many kids. We even made a video about this, about children with cancer knowing words that most adults have never heard. And just last week, I heard about a disease that I had never heard about after 24 years doing this work. So we're finding out things all the time. Now, I'm a layperson. I'm not a medical provider, but there is just this world. It's like an onion, and you just keep peeling after layer after layer after layer. So I can only imagine that it's frustrating. I will say that there are some other points of hope, which is a few years ago, we were able to get through Congress the Childhood Cancer Data Initiative, and to get funding for that. And that's $50 million a year to aggregate a lot of the data to make decisions by doctors more easily, and get them the information they need, and to be able to identify who the experts are in all these various diseases and so forth. And we've got the pediatric cancer data commons that we began funding years ago for neuroblastoma, to kind of aggregate all the neuroblastoma specific data. And that has now become kind of the model for data sharing it across many of the diseases, and eventually all the pediatric diseases will be there. So there's different platforms that specialize in different types of data. What we have asked as lay people frequently is, should all these be one? Shouldn't it all be in one place? And the researchers and the data scientists have actually said no, because there are, and I won't do the explanation justice, but they've actually said there's impractical reasons why you shouldn't have it all in one place. But the important thing is that they be available, and that they're open to all researchers and doctors. And they are. These are open platforms that they don't want someone who doesn't have the credentials to get in there, only because they want to make sure the information is going to be properly utilized, and that you have a license on the line if you don't use it properly. They don't want people getting in there and corrupting anything. There are a number of efforts, and those two are not the only ones, but there are ones to speed the pace of research, to make information more accessible to parents and so forth. And what's holding it up is dollars, because in in the world of research and academia, you're never going to make the kind of money you can make if you go to work for Apple or Amazon or Google. And so, or Microsoft. So, you can, because we don't, as society and budgets at academic institutions and hospitals and government jobs, there isn't the appetite to pay those people. They're expected to serve. But in corporate America, you're able to earn whatever the market will pay you. And so until I think our thinking as a society changes and we are willing to say we're going to compete and we're going to let people earn what they deserve to be earned based upon their study and their skills and their abilities, then we're going to be limited because you're counting on someone to do the work who has a heart for the work and who is very committed to the mission. And so it limits how fast you can make progress because you're not going to have as many hands available. So we have to get more money to the people doing the work, and we have to find more people who are willing to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that was the one thing it was based off of the bill that Ami Bera was putting through in Washington to come up with kind of a data bank, data initiative for DIPG or DPG or DMG, excuse me. And it was, I thought, okay, we're here in Wisconsin. We've got one of the biggest, university systems here in UW. And if you've ever been to Madison, the university itself is its own city. And you drive for miles and miles and you're still seeing it. And I said, and when I went out there to visit the lab that was doing the research on neuroblastoma, and I'm looking around wondering, where is the research on brain cancer? Where is the research on the most deadly form of childhood cancer and the most underfunded, which is brain cancer? Where is it at? So I reached out and was able to get in touch with several doctors there that actually said, we have a protocol in place for a data bank like this to have these rare tumors on file, have them here. We just don't have the money. We don't have the funding for it, and we don't have the staff for it. I said, okay, well then let's make that change. Let's make that happen. So I've already been on the phone and on Zoom calls with the governor's office. This is going to happen come hell or high water. No matter what I have to do, we're going to make it happen because it's important to create something that not only can be utilized here, but that can be mirrored everywhere and allow every state or every, municipality to have something like this to give the opportunity to somebody that wants to come in and say, we're going to do this and we're going to research this, and that every student wants to research, XYZ. You want to come in and be the one like me that wants to grab something that is not normal. When I was in high school, I took French when everybody else was taking Spanish because I didn't want to be like everybody else. I wanted to do one. Now I can't remember any of it, but I want, but that was, it's like, that's what I want. I want those kids that are coming in that say, I want to go after something that's unique, that's challenging, that's not going to just be not necessarily easy, but it's going to come easier to me. I want something that's challenging. So the funding, the staffing, it's a massive issue, but that means that we have to get more eyes and ears on this problem that want to get out there and listen.